All right, let's get the fallout from all of this. We have Noelle Nikpour joining us, GOP fundraiser. You know that. Doug Schoen, Democratic pollster. You know him as well. Guys, thank you for coming. Doug, could I get your sense about this rift within the Democratic Party? They're told, no, it's not nearly as big as you think. But when you start arguing over things like semantics and illegal versus you shouldn't be here, it is a hint of maybe some problems to come. What do you make of that?
It is an issue because, Neil, bluntly, the president should have been more forthright and more aggressive in his willingness to use executive orders against illegal immigration, tightening up the asylum process, and even building a wall and fencing. And bottom line, he was very careful. We saw in those remarks just now how careful he was with his nomenclature. The squad may not have numbers, but they have share of voice, and they have resonance in the liberal media, and that's what Joe Biden was taking pains to avoid offending after a speech that, if nothing else, convinced people that he has the strength at this point to fight a campaign.
You know, I'm wondering, guys, and we're seeing the frustration with setting up the exact same race we had 4 years ago, and a lot of people are saying, there's got to be an alternative. Along comes no labels to indicate they don't necessarily have a candidate in mind yet, although we're hearing a couple of names are being bandied about. We'll get into that in a second. But, Noelle, the one thing I picked up from Joe Lieberman is that their intent, that is no labels, to be on all 50 state ballots, and it's full steam ahead. This is from Joe Lieberman. Are you looking, for example, at Nikki Haley?
Well, and Nikki Haley is really, I think if she had expressed interest in the no labels nomination, there would have been a lot of support in our group, but she's chosen otherwise.
Sinema, the independent Arizona senator, former Democrat, who opted out of running again for that office, have you talked to her about maybe a bigger office?
She's not interested. I look forward to coming on the show, and I can tell you the names, but we're not going to be a long way from that. We're ready to go if the delegates authorized today, and that'll happen in, my guess, the next couple of weeks.
Of that and whether there's any movement there. Jeff Duncan, the former lieutenant governor of Georgia's name has been mentioned. A lot of people don't know him on a national basis, but what do you think?
You know, I think that they had good intentions. I think that they went off an early poll that said that 43% of Americans are undecided. They, if given the chance to vote for Trump or Biden, that they don't like either one of them. So I think that they went out and that was their whole mission statement. They raised money on that. One of the things I think that they're probably going to come to a roadblock is how can you raise money with a zero candidate name? Candidates have certain brands, and how can you seriously raise over a certain amount of money when you actually have no name? The other thing of it is, now that it's tightening up and getting closer, nobody, that's a Democrat, nobody that's a Republican wants to shake up their party like that, because we don't know which sides actually it pulls from. Is it going to pull from people that are very uncomfortable voting for Biden because they think he's inept, or is it going to pull from, the Trump voter that doesn't like Trump? Nobody wants to tick off their original party that they stand with a D or an R, because they don't know which side it's going to pull. So the ramifications for doing a no labels ticket, as you can see, all these people from Nikki Haley, Chris Christie, all these people are like, no, Joe Manchin, nobody's doing it because nobody wants to be the spoiler alert if the election goes either way, saying that they're to blame for it.
Well, to her point, Doug, a lot of those bold-faced names from Joe Manchin to Chris Christie, even Nikki Haley, seem to have dismissed that. Larry Hogan went ahead, the former Maryland governor, and started run for Senate right now, so that takes him out. So then you go down the list, and it's not quite as impressive. I don't mean that to disparage anyone else, but just to say they're not as well known. So you have to deal with that besides raising money, besides getting on ballots.
And there's one other issue, Neil, with Robert F. Kennedy Jr., a candidate pulling anywhere from 7 to 15% of the vote. Some of the vote that would be expected to go to a credible no labels candidate, if in fact they come up with one, I think is naturally going to Robert F. Kennedy Jr. So there's a real question.
He won't even be on all state ballots as things stand now, right?
Yes, that's at this point he aspirationally wants to be. He could make a deal with the Libertarians, but even if he's on some state ballots, Neil, it makes the bar a higher one for no labels. And Jeff Duncan, a good man, certainly, I don't believe can attract national support and most of all national finance should he go forward.
Yeah, it's a tough road.
It is.
Noelle, meanwhile, back to the Republican candidate, Donald Trump, of course, the search for a vice presidential running mate, and of course, it's a wide list, but it was an issue that included Mike Pompeo. I had Mike Pompeo on to talk about that. You might be surprised at his answer, or maybe not. Take a look.
It's flattering that my name comes up, that they had a chance to serve for 4 years and didn't completely blow it. So people still think, hey, it might be possible he'd get another swing. I don't often comment on jobs I've not been offered, but Neil, you've known me long enough to know that if I get a chance to serve and think that I can make a difference, I'm almost certainly going to say yes to that opportunity to try and deliver on behalf of the American people.
What do you think of that, Noelle?
I think that he gave you an honest answer. I think if Trump asked him to serve as VP and run with him, I think he just told you that 100% he's in. And actually, I think a lot of people giving the opportunity to be the VP, considering that, Trump's not going to run again, and basically the job would be theirs to run.
Sure.
For 2028. So I think that he's in for the job if he's asked.
All right. Well, watch closely. Guys, thank you coming in on Saturday.
Thank you.
Nasty weather outside. Much appreciated.
I'm Steve Ducey.
I'm Brian Kilmeade.
And I'm Ainsley Earhart. And click here to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page to catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis.